Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Maths with Lazy Bee. In this video, we'll be discussing the question of JEE Mains 2026. And the question says that let the maximum value of the function fx equals to sine inverse x square plus cos inverse x whole square be m by n pi square. So this is the maximum value of this function, where GCD of m and n is 1. That means the highest common factor of m and n is 1. So we have to calculate m plus n. So basically, we have to find the value of m and n. Only then we'll be able to find m plus n. So x is lying in this interval. So this is the question of inverse trigonometric functions. And when we are dealing with maximum minimum, then it is very clear that we will be using the derivative rules. That is, if f prime x is 0, then that means the point x is either the minima or the maxima. Point of minima or the point of maxima. So, in order to solve this question, let us differentiate this function. We'll be getting 2 sine inverse x on root 1 minus x. We're using chain rule. And similarly, for this, we'll be getting 2 cos inverse x and minus 4 root 1 minus x squared. Now, f prime x equals to 2 sine inverse x minus cos inverse x. In order to find the point where the function is taking a maximum value or a minimum value, we have to equate the f prime x, the first derivative of the function, to be 0. This implies this is 0. This implies either this is 0 or this is 0 or both of these expressions are 0. So can this be 0? Can 2 by root 1 minus x square ever be 0? No, it cannot be 0, because for a fraction to be 0, it is important for the numerator to be 0, and this is not happening. So that means this term is not 0. That means this term has to be 0. This implies sine inverse x equals to cos inverse x. And x is lying between minus root 3 by 2 and 1 by root 2. So we have to find the x for which f prime x equals to 0, and we are getting this equation, sine inverse x equals to cos inverse x. Now, when are sine inverse x and cos inverse x equal to each other when x is lying in this interval? So, you know that sine inverse x takes values between minus pi by 2 to pi by 2. And cos inverse x takes values between 0 to pi, where is pi by 2. So this is first quadrant, fourth quadrant. For the angles, this will be giving you an angle and this will be giving you an angle. This will be giving you an angle in minus pi by 2 to pi by 2. And this will be giving you an angle in 0 to pi interval. So this is clear that for the angles to be equal, x should be such that both the angles, when you are getting the angles, they are lying in the first quadrant. Because if you are getting sine inverse x in the second quadrant, then it is, sorry, if you are getting cos inverse x in the second quadrant, then it is not possible for sine inverse x to be in the second quadrant, because sine inverse x always lies in the first quadrant or in the fourth quadrant. So you will be getting the first quadrant only. You will be getting the angle in the first quadrant only. And when is it possible? So if you draw the graph of both sine inverse x and cos inverse x, and in the first quadrant means that both are taking a positive value. That means x is a positive value, because if x is greater than 0, then sine inverse x will also be lying in the first quadrant and cos inverse x also be lying in the first quadrant. So that means x is greater than 0. If x was less than 0, then cos inverse x would have lied in the second quadrant. The angle would have been between pi by 2 to pi, and for sine inverse x, the angle would have been in the fourth quadrant. This is how the functions, the principal branches are actually defined. So, and when you plot the graph of the function sine inverse x, you'll be getting this. And this is pi by 2. And when you plot the graph of the function cos inverse x, you'll be getting something like this. So they intersect. And where do they intersect? Now, if you must have done this in class 10th, that for the angle 45 degree or pi by 4, sine and cos both take the same value 1 by root 2. And x is lying, the maximum value x can attain is 1 by root 2. So the point where the sine inverse x and cos inverse x intersect is clearly this. In the first quadrant, these are equal. The function sine theta and cos theta are equal for the angle pi by 4 or 45 degree. That means this angle is actually pi by 4, and where does the function sine inverse x and cos inverse x take the angle as pi by 4? It is for the point 1 by root 2. So this is how we are able to calculate the point. Okay. Now that means f prime 1 by root 2 equals to 0. But we cannot say right now whether the function is taking a maximum value or a minimum value at 1 by root 2 unless we calculate the double derivative of this function. So the function f prime x is actually 2 upon 1 minus root 1 minus x square, and sine inverse x minus cos inverse x. Now you have to take the double derivative. That means you have to differentiate the function f prime x. And you will be getting, using the product rule, sine inverse x minus cos inverse x remains as it is, plus 2 upon 1 minus 2 square, and this is 1 minus x square plus 1 minus root 1 minus x square. This is because when you differentiate this, you get root minus 1 upon root 1 minus x square. And since there is a negative sign over here, it gets positive and you end up getting this expression. And this gets cancelled. Negative signs also get cancelled. You are left with this. Okay. Now, since we have f prime at 1 by root 2 equals to 0, that means we have to check whether the double derivative is giving you a positive value or a negative value. If it gives you a positive value, that means at x equals to 1 by root 2, the function is attaining a minima. And if it is less than 0 or negative, that means the function is attaining the maximum value over that point. So, substituting x equals to 1 by root 2, you get this as pi by 4, this as pi by 4 when x is 1 by root 2. Angle is 45 degree. And so this term is actually 0 because pi by 4 minus pi by 4 is 0. And this becomes 1 minus x. And x is actually 1 by root 2. So that means this is 1 up. This is actually 8, which is greater than 0. That means at this is the minimum value. This is not the minimum value. The point 1 by root 2, f attains minima or the minimum value at x equals to 1 by root. But in the question, we have to find the value of m and n. That means we have to find the value, the point where the function attains the maximum value. And 1 by root 2 is definitely not that point because at this point, function is attaining its minimum value. So what do we have to do now? Now, at 1 by root 2, the function is attaining the minimum value, its minimum value. That means if we are able to prove that the function is decreasing over this interval, if the function is decreasing, then we are sure that at minus root 3 by 2, the function is attaining the maximum value because as x is increasing, the function is decreasing. Okay, so we just need to prove that the function is a decreasing function, and for that it is enough to show that f prime x or the slope is less than 0 at all the points. So the f prime x is actually now x is lying in this interval. Now if we break the interval in two parts, now if you see this interval carefully, then x is taking a negative value. That means, and you know that sign attains negative value in the fourth quadrant. According to the principal value, principal branch, in the principal branch, sign attains its negative value in the fourth quadrant. That means when x is negative, sign inverse x is lying in the fourth quadrant. Because in the first quadrant, sign is positive. And since x is negative, that means we are talking about the fourth quadrant. The sine inverse x gives values in the first and fourth quadrant. So we're talking about the fourth quadrant. In fourth quadrant, sine inverse x is lying between minus pi by 2 and 0. That means sine inverse x is actually negative here. Sine inverse x is actually negative here. And since x is negative, that means cos inverse x is lying in pi by 2 to pi. That means cos inverse x is actually greater than 0. Cos inverse x is actually greater than 0. That means when we see this in this function, so this is negative because the angles are lying in the fourth quadrant. In the fourth quadrant, we take it in this direction. So minus pi by 2 to 0, according to the principal value of the sine inverse function. We are getting the angle in the minus pi by 2 to 0 interval. And this is positive. And since we are getting a negative sign here, that means overall minus cos inverse x will be negative and overall the quantity will be negative. This means that for f prime x is less than 0, for all x lying in this interval. Now coming on to the next, since we have divided the interval where x is lying, if x is lying in this interval, then what will happen? Function is and you know that this is always positive, so I'm not talking about this. This is always going to be positive. Square root function always gives a positive value. So this is positive. Now, when x is lying in this interval 0 to 1 by root 2, how is it going to behave? How is this quantity going to behave? Will it be positive or negative? Now again, as I drew the graph of some function, sine inverse x and cos inverse x. So if this is 0, this is 1, this is pi by 2, then you know that sine inverse x is like this. Or maybe like this. And cos inverse x is like this. And the intersection point is 1 by root 2, and this is the angle pi by 4. So this is cos inverse x, and this is sine inverse x. And x is lying between 0 and 1 by root 2. That means this. We have to restrict ourselves till this point only. So what can you see that cos inverse x is actually greater than 0. And sine inverse x is also greater than 0. But cos inverse x is actually greater than sine inverse x. Cos inverse x is actually greater than sine inverse x because you see that the function sine inverse x is actually lying below cos inverse x when x is lying between 0 and 1 by root 2. In this interval, when x is lying in 0 and 1 by root 2, you can see that this is above the function sine inverse x. That means this is cos inverse x is actually greater than sine inverse x when x is lying in this interval. So this means that this is greater than 0 and hence this quantity will be less than 0. Because cos inverse x is greater than sine inverse x. That means 2, for example, something like 0 minus 1, then we'll be getting -1. That means we'll be getting a negative value. So f prime is less than 0. And we don't need to include 1 by root 2 actually, because we know that 1 by root 2, as we calculated earlier, that f prime is taking 0 value at 1 by root 2. So f prime x is strictly less than 0 when x is lying between 0 and 1 by root 2, where 1 by root 2 is not included. So this is what we get. And for minus root 3 by 2 to 0 also, we got that one f prime x, or the derivative of the function f, is less than 0. This just proves that this implies f prime x is less than 0 for all x lying interval 1 by root 2, where I'm not including 1 by root 2 because f prime is 0 at that point. This implies fx is decreasing. Function in this interval. That means since it's a decreasing function, this implies fx attains its maximum value at x equals to minus root 3 by 2, because when we move ahead of minus root 3 by 2, the function decreases. If the function is decreasing when x is increasing, that means when we start, at the point when we start, that at that point only we'll be getting the maximum value. This is what it means when we talk about the decreasing functions. So when we start, then only, at that point only we'll be getting the maximum value, because as we move ahead, as our x is increasing, as our x is going forward, the value of the function is decreasing. This implies fx attains its maximum value at the point x equals to minus root 3 by 2. So you just need to calculate fx at this point. Which is this function. So f at minus root 3 by 2 is sine inverse minus root 3 by 2 whole square plus cos inverse minus root 3 by 2 square. And so root 3 by 2 sine attains root 3 by 2 value at the angle 60 degree. So that means, and since it lies in the fourth quadrant, or like this, we have to take in this direction. So this will be minus pi by 3 whole square. So this is 60 degree, that means minus 60 degree. And cos attains minus root 3 by 2 at the angle 30 degree, or pi by 6. But now we have to check in the principal branch. That means in the second quadrant, cos attains a negative value. So it will be this, and this will be pi minus pi by 6. That means pi by 6, and pi square by 9, 5 pi by 6 whole square. And you get pi square by 9 plus 25 pi by 6, pi square 136. You get 29 pi square 136. This means this equals to m by n, since this is the maximum value. Now m equals to 29, n equals to 36. When you add them, you'll be getting 65. And this is the final answer. So the answer to this question is n plus n equals to 65. So thank you so much for watching this video. And if you have any doubts, then please let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much. See you.